Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here. Today's guest is Jody Williams, an esteemed power player. He is one of those people that has been the instrument and the tool behind so many hit songs, so many artist careers, and it was always because he followed his gut. Please hit subscribe, like, share, leave a 5-star review. It's not that hard to hit that little subscribe button. I'd love it if you do it because it helps the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoy this episode with Jody Williams.
This is the Stephan Hogan Podcast.
It seems like the business in the country, or just the music business in general, is constantly changing. And yes. I remember talking to you once and you were like, man, it's changed so much just from like when we first met to where it is right now.
It has.
So let's go into some of those changes. What are they?
Well, it's the way I say it, I tell people this, and we feel this every day in the office. Like today, the target for what we're doing with our publishing company is right there. It's on the wall. We see it. That's our target. That's where we're pointing our ship. And for decades, the target was we'd walk back in the next morning and the target was in the same place. Now we walk back in the next morning and we're looking around the room and the target has moved and we don't know where it went. And it takes us half a day to find it, to where we're comfortable enough to aim our ship that way this time. So that presents obvious challenges. And when I talk about this, it's just reflective of how everybody's targets have changed, because the creators are now more in charge of everything than they've ever been. And they're less seasoned at the same time. And there's less of an emphasis of playing to the major labels. Everybody's doing it themselves. Any one of us could have the right answer today and create the correct target. So it has encouraged believing in yourself and your own ideas. So if I like this, and I've always operated this way, if I find a songwriter or an artist and I go, I like that, and if I like that, somebody else is bound to like it. I mean, somebody else is bound to like it, and that's what I'm betting on. I'm gonna pay this guy to write songs or cut masters or do whatever we're gonna do, and I think we can recoup that money basically because I like it, and I'm gonna find a way to expose it to enough people to recoup the investment I'm going to make. Mm-hmm. And so that's different with really every writer or writer-artist. You know, the thing I've noticed in the last 20 years is that there's fewer and fewer just songwriters coming to town. Everybody is an artist. And there's an advantage to that because you can get your songs cut by other people as a songwriter, or you can record the songs yourself. So most everybody is an artist now, and that has allowed them to go invest in themselves and cut their own masters and be able to release it on the streaming services and be discovered. And that whole mindset has taken the focus off of the labels until it's time for until it blows up. When it looks like it's blowing up, the labels will call you. You don't have to go call them. And that's empowering. Now it takes, I'm 5 years into this publishing company that I started. 4.5 years in. And just now are we getting the success financially that will recoup the investment that Warner Chappell Music has made in us. But it's taken until 6 months ago for that to start happening.
Wow.
So we've spent plenty of their money and some of my own to prove the point that the music that we like can be financially viable.
When you say, back to target, when you say target, what is that target? By definition, the target used to be the same, now the target's always moving. Is that kind of just, as you said, the cultural shift of what is consumable?
Yeah, it's that, but it's depending less on A&R people at labels to take your songs and deliver them to their artists. I mean, that's the easiest and quickest way to make money is if Jelly Roll cuts one of our songs that somebody else wrote, or that we've hooked our writer up with Jelly Roll and his team to write a song, and we get a piece of that song. And so we still do that, and we still want the labels to know that we have viable music and that their artists should write with our writers. But we're out there really proving it ourselves. So the artists that are smart enough to cut their own demos with little or no charge, where they're not spending money, and then they just release the music, and then it starts streaming, or they're touring a little bit and they're causing activity to happen on their own, that's really taking up more of our time than it's ever taken.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people I talk to talk about and it's interesting because you talked about masters and the amount of money that you can make owning the master versus being signed to like a record deal where everybody's kind of getting a percentage, and at the end of the day, the amount you get compared to what you would make if you owned the master is very different. And that brings me to the question of outside songs. And you're saying that it seems like everybody's an artist. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the amount of just writers seems to be diminishing.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yes, it has diminished quite a bit. And they're still out there. And the ones, I mean, look at Ashley Gorley. He's the most glaring example of a guy who's not an artist. But boy, he's the most successful songwriter ever in Nashville. Yeah. And I mean, the next guy down is way below that, where his level of success is. So, I can Jesse Alexander at Warner Chappell is a great example of somebody who's just really started out being an artist, and she still scratches that itch, I think, from time to time as an artist. But mainly, she's a day-to-day songwriter getting cuts on everybody.
Yeah. What about Nathan Chapman?
Nathan Chapman is a perfectly wonderful songwriter who has all these other interests and skills. He's a photographer. He likes playing bass on people's sessions. He's an incredible producer. I mean, his producer track record speaks for itself. And he's a really good songwriter and singer. So, we worked with him he's a dear friend of mine, and we worked together for the first 3 years of our company.
Yeah. I was just curious because it seems like a lot of these people that have been super successful have also almost been grandfathered into this, they're going to stay. But anybody that's like trying to break in now just as a writer, just because I get that DM question a lot, like, can you be just a songwriter and move to Nashville? And I always kind of think about taking outside songs. And will you talk about that a little bit and how hard it is or easy it is to get an outside song cut?
Yeah, it's hard. It's harder than ever to get an outside song cut. But there's plenty of examples where it still happens. And, a lot of those outside cuts are written by other artists that just didn't make that artist's project, and some publisher, one of the co-publishers, pitched the song, and it got cut. So it's just one thing that we've done as a community over the last 20 or so years, maybe 30 years, is we have taken the artist that has come to town who really deserves a record deal, and we've told them, even if they're not a songwriter, we've told them that they are a songwriter, and we have given them a publishing deal, and we've put them in the room with seasoned writers where they are the low man on the totem pole in terms of what they're able to deliver in a writing session. And yet they're more likely to cut that song because they wrote it. And some would argue that has lowered the quality on the songs in the last 20 years because the artist, who is really a pretty good deliverer and vehicle for the song, is not really the best songwriter, so it lowered the bar on the song in general. So some would make that argument, and sometimes I think that's true. And then you have other situations where you really need a new voice as a songwriter. So even though they're not a seasoned writer in a traditional sense, they are viewing the world in a completely different way than anybody else has, and it's a whole new way. And this is, I always point to Taylor Swift. She has convinced the world she's convinced her fans just by writing songs to look at the world through her lens. She sees a scenario and this happening and that happening, whether it be relationship or whatever. She sees it through her lens, and it's different than anybody else's lens. And that's what I look for when I look for new talent. It's like somebody that can just write a song that sounds like somebody else's last hit. We don't need that. We don't need redundancy. We need somebody who's skilled enough at songwriting to show you how they view the world that you've never seen before.
Yeah, because everybody has their own story.
Right.
So you could essentially come into the right with, you could be signed. Let's say you have an artist they're signed with you, and maybe they don't have a ton of writing experience, but you see the it factor in your gut. What you mentioned at the beginning was like, I know that people are going to like this person. Like,
yes,
I trust my gut as
right.
Jody. And so you put them in the room with great writers, and they can say, hey, this is a thing that happened to me that shaped who I am. The whole song could be written. Maybe they didn't have a lot of lines they wrote in the song, but the fact that they had that story is what made the song.
That's exactly right. See, it can happen in all different ways. And the seasoned professional writers who get into the room with the artist who is not that good of a writer but has that story, they will let that artist lead if the story is compelling.
Yeah.
They'll say, okay, then what happened? And then they'll keep that song in between the ditches enough to where it's tight, at the end.
Yeah. How much has social media impacted, specifically TikTok, impacted the music business?
Greatly. It's something that we use as a tool in our toolbox. It's not the do all end all for us. I still approach my role in a traditional sense. But we have a writer named writer-artist named Harper O'Neill, and I found her on TikTok. I typed in my search, female blues singers, barbecue videos, and golf instructional videos. That was my initial things that I was searching for in TikTok. And I'm convinced that somebody in China knew exactly who I was and started sending me exactly what I wanted to hear in terms of my taste in music. Next thing you know, this girl, Harper O'Neill, right at the very beginning when I started doing this, she pops up, and she had barely been on TikTok. She maybe had posted 3 or 4 things. And I saw this, and I heard her voice, and I heard the song she was singing, and I thought, I like everything about this. I like the song. I like her. And her voice was so unique. And I thought, well, she probably lives in Australia, and I'll never meet her. But how fun it is to find this. And then the next morning, I go into the office, and I'm Googling and trying to find other things about her, going to YouTube and see if there's anything there. Next thing you know, I find out she lives in the Nations. She's in Nashville. Have a meeting with her 2 days later, and we offered her a deal, and she's with us now. Managed by John Peets, who manages Eric Church and Ashley McBride. Wow. And she's cut masters, and she's just cut new music, and she's not really country. She's not really, she toured opening up for Lainey Wilson, and she opens for Old Crow Medicine Show in St. Paul and the Broken Bones. So we're not putting a ceiling over her head saying she's country or she's Americana. She just is making great music.
She is Harper.
She is Harper, and she has her own little franchise that we're trying to build.
That's awesome. I feel like genres are breaking apart slowly.
Well, they sure are in country music.
And I like it.
Yeah.
Because people want to always put you in a genre,
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, you do songs what kind of music do you do? And it's like a harper would be, well, like, I kind of do this, but that, but it's this and that, or whatever aspects her music are. But you can't quantify it down to one word. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, it's great. It's great. I mean, people your age and younger didn't really grow up thinking, I'm a country fan and that's all I'm going to listen to, or I'm a rock fan and that's all I'm going to listen to. We listen to all of it. And country music finally is sort of representative of a lot of different types of music, you know, since bro country, you know, walked away.
Yeah.
It just opened up. So it's everything from Lainey Wilson to Jelly Roll to Morgan Wallen to Zach Bryan. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like you have this like super singer-songwriter-y folk country or non-country thing, all the way to still you have some trap beats on songs.
Right.
And everything in between.
Exactly.
So it's almost like radio was in the 90s or the 80s, where you would, I think I liken it to, you know, you'd have like a Van Halen song or something, but then you might have a Tears for Fears or Bruce Hornsby song. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that stuff was together, even though there were format stations.
Yeah.
There was still a lot more, I feel like, of a melting pot of tunes being played on the radio.
Yeah, it's like the advent of FM radio in the late 60s, early 70s was Led Zeppelin and James Taylor, you know, could coexist back to back, and nobody thought anything of it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of there with country music.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Because that is actually promising to the musician that's like, I feel like my stuff doesn't fit country. Because we all have when you say country music, we all have a preconceived kind of ideology of what country music is. And we see a cowboy hat and cowboy boots and someone singing about trucks and beer. But what you're really saying is the genre is wide open.
It's wide open. We found a guy that we're wanting to sign, and he sounds like a new version of Gordon Lightfoot. So it's like folk pop music with a guy who sings sort of with this Orbison type of thing. It's just it's like I've just never quite heard it. I've never heard music like his before. It doesn't sound like anybody currently that I know of. But because the climate has changed, he's got a shot. And people are paying attention and wanting to invest in him. So
what I like about you is that I feel like you never chased in terms of looking for talent. I feel like because this town, to me, the more I talk to people and get to know it, it seems like everybody's trying to, you know, you have a Morgan Wallen, and then you have a bunch of people trying to be Morgan Wallen, or a bunch of labels looking for the other Morgan Wallen types or whatever. But then Jody Williams is like, no, I'm looking for something that's completely different that we haven't heard of, so we can have the first insert artist here.
Right. Yes. There are the knockoff Morgan Wallens. You know, I'm looking. Yeah, I've always looked for sort of I want to be the only one in town who has this type of artist. And if it's successful, other artists will be influenced by that artist, and they'll show up, and some of those people will get record deals and have success. That's just the nature of pop music in general.
But your artists will be at the top of that hierarchy because they paved the way. I'm trying for that.
Yeah. And also I'm on the artists that are already out there, like when we get an outside cut or we put one of our writers with an artist, it's something unique. You're going to remember it. And in a traditional sense, we call those copyrights. That's a real copyright. You don't want just a knockoff, the knockoff bro country songs that came after Cruise. You can't really remember who some of the artists were and what the songs were. They just kind of sounded like that, and they were knockoffs. And radio has got to play some superstars, and then they've got to keep the listener engaged with other other music on artists that aren't necessarily big stars, but they have created the fodder to fill in the gaps between when they play the superstars. Yeah. So that's the way it's always been, and everybody's trying for their best. A lot of people, the major companies have to chase the major fads, okay, and the independent companies tend to chase something that's a little bit different. So if you're going to find something a little bit different, you have a greater. Some would argue that this is not true, but I would say there's a greater chance of finding something really different at an independent company, because they don't want to compete with the majors in terms of, because the majors have to have their market share, and they have to have the lowest common denominator type music.
Is that because they want to recoup their investment?
Yeah,
as fast as
it's a
possible?
business. It's a business. It's a business at our level too. And we're spending with our partners Warner Chappell, and we're part of their market share. So they want us to have success, but they know that we're likely to find a Harper O'Neill maybe a little quicker than they are. And they champion that. They've been great with Harper.
That's
since
cool.
We had her. Yeah,
because I feel like artists are gone through so fast on the label side.
Yeah,
like you'll get signed or they put out a EP or just a song or two, and if it doesn't perform well, they'll just kind of fall off. And I see a lot of that happening. But then on your side, you're almost like old school, like artist development, right? A little bit more, because we all know that labels don't do artist development anymore.
Right.
But the publishing companies have almost become the artist development side.
Right.
Would you say it's the minor leagues for the majors?
In a sense, it is. We want to be viewed by the majors as like, if they sign an artist and they want to make sure they've got enough really good and different songs, we want them to think of our writers to put with their artist, because our writers are going to think of something a little bit different. It's got to fit what the radio might play, but it's just going to be a little bit different. And so that's kind of the place where we live.
And do you recoup your costs? So, I mean, you obviously think in terms of months, years, decades versus days and weeks when you start a business in terms of recouping your initial investment. But when it comes to making your money back on artists, and this is just something I'm curious about for the industry, is it predominantly through streaming, or is it predominantly through just getting cuts with other big artists that are going to stream well?
It's all of it at the same time, as much of it as we can have. We have an artist named Peyton Porter, who we own the masters on, and along with Warner Chappell, and we want to recoup the investment that we've made in her from her masters, and we also want her to. And it's we're hoping for radio, okay? But she streams really well, and other artists are recording her songs now. So we want all of those sources. The other big sources are syncs. So when your song is in film or TV, and those numbers seem to be going down a little bit to me, but they still can be, if you look up and get in a big movie or something like that, they're really good. And that's a great way to, we've had a couple of songs in Yellowstone, and that's decent money.
Yeah. So you like that show?
Yeah, I do.
Me too.
I do.
And Lainey was in it.
Yeah.
So with Peyton, like, if, for example, she just debuted at the Grand Ole Opry, right? How long did it take to get from like point signing pub deal to debuting at the Opry?
3 years.
Okay.
From us working with her, and she really had nothing going on when we signed her, which is a hard place to start from, because you don't have that long. At some point, Warner Chappell will come and say, we can't spend any more money because it's not recouping fast enough, which is totally understandable. And all the writers know that. Everybody knows that. We started with her where she had a viral moment, and we thought, well, this is a little earlier than we wanted to get started with you as an artist, but because you've had this viral moment on TikTok, let's fast track. Let's just go faster than we thought.
Let's ride the wave.
Yeah, because there are major label artists who don't have those moments, and their teams can't generate a moment for them like that. So, but when somebody just has one organically, take advantage of it. So that's what we did, and it's hard. It's hard to do that. It's hard to hang in there with an artist like that, as good as they are. If the money gets, if you've put out more money than you are becoming comfortable with.
Do you protect the artist from that? Because I would imagine when you are signed, if you're thinking like, oh man, if I don't get this cut, or if I'm not successful, it's almost like a chain around your neck every time you go to write, because you're trying to write the next big hit versus what's the best song for the room that day. How do you navigate that with writers? Because you said they do know.
They know generally what their balance is, but they don't. That's why I like, Peyton. I want her head to kind of be in the clouds and be a creator, because that's where the best songs come from that will recoup the deal. So I don't want her thinking about all this stuff all the time. I think about it, but every writer knows that there's a limit to how far their publisher can go financially before the dollars start coming in.
Okay. Yeah, I like that, keeping your head, because ignorance is bliss.
Well,
and I think for a creator, you can't be in a mind frame of thinking about that you might get dropped at any moment because you have hit your ceiling financially.
Yeah. You can go with a brand new writer in their first deal. You can go 3 or 4 years if you believe in it that much and you have a track record of earnings, but you can't go. You can't have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting there with no clue of how you're going to recoup it. You can't get yourself in that position.
Yeah.
So you have to be really smart, and writers should take as little publishing advance as they can, because it just lengthens the runway that the publisher can work with you.
Yeah, and that's something I want to talk about too, because pub deals, like your first time deal, I have friends that have signed and got 10 grand for their draw, and I know people, I think the most like 30 grand for a first time deal. And that kind of leaves you, unless you live very minimally with a lot of roommates and you don't have a car payment and stuff, that's not a lot of money, but at the same time, it's a lot of money on the publisher side because you have to recoup it all. So I'm curious if, when you're working with an artist and you're developing them, do you suggest like, hey, work a part-time jobs and write? Is that kind of the framework that is set up, or does it really just depend on the individual?
I think it kind of depends on the individual, but $30,000, for a first-time publishing deal that's a writer-artist, $30,000 is a good. You don't want to go more than that. You want them to stop working at the coffee shop. Okay, you're saying, instead of giving you 10 where you still have to work at the coffee shop, I'm going to give you 30 so you can stop working at the coffee shop and spend more of your daylight hours writing songs and building up your catalog. And inevitably, the draws go up year to year. So,
and that's due to cuts potentially.
No, they go up because that's what you negotiate on the front end. So it's usually a 1 plus 3 1 year option, 1 year plus 3 1 year options. So it's usually 30, 32, 5, 35, 37, 5, just like that.
And so on.
A little bit more every year.
Okay.
And I've tried to just encourage my new writers to not depend on that draw as much. And so, for instance, with Peyton, she is booked by CAA, so she got to supplement her income by getting some good paying gigs along the way.
And selling merch
And all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just very hard to, it's almost like it's gotta blow up from the very beginning.
Yeah.
With a writer artist that you're really investing with like that, because if it's taking 2 or 3 years, it's taking 2 or 3 years too long. And so, but at the same time, the publisher is pitching their songs that they're not recording for themselves to other artists and getting them cut, and we've done that with her and with Harper too.
How much is it relationship based to get cuts?
It's 1,000% relationship based. We sort of, me and Nina, who is my senior creative person at my company and really runs things day to day, we sort of, this week we said it's really all about strategic co-writes for your writers, pitching songs, and minding your relationships. Those are the 3 new tenets, whereas it used to be, play to the labels, make sure everything you're doing is aimed toward the radio with a major label. That was really the focus. It's not our focus anymore. We want to have a dozen meaningful digital releases out there at any given time, and it keeps refreshing every week. We used to think, wouldn't it be great to have, like when we first started, like if we had like 2 digital releases a month? Wouldn't that be great? And now it's like there's barely a week that goes by that we don't have like 3 every week, which is great. And that counts for something. The publishing revenue is not big on that. If you own masters, that's good. But you kind of wake up and you've got your fingers crossed that today's the day. Just this year, we had Lainey Wilson's debut single. Lainey Wilson, ACM and CMA Entertainer of the Year, records a new album. Everybody that has a cut on that album is like, this is the album to be on this year.
Yeah.
So we got 2 cuts on there.
Jason Nix
Wrote both of them, one with my son Driver and one with, and these are with Lainey too.
Yeah.
And so the first single, Jason and Driver wrote, it's called Hang Tight Honey. And it was the first single. And you would think that's no-brainer number 1. It goes to number 10, stops. And it's going to earn some good money for sure. But you would, like, even though it's like sort of the hottest artist that's out there, Lainey's right up there with, in terms of, as everybody knows, with Jelly Roll and Zach Bryan and all of them.
She's
Luke Combs, she's at the top.
For a female artist right now, I would argue, the biggest.
Right. Exactly. So and then we have Jackson Dean's current single that Driver is a writer on, that's just starting up. We have Parker McCullum's current single that's just bubbling up, just was released about a month ago, and it's slow. It's just so slow. It takes forever. It takes forever for the song to get as high as it's going to get, and then it takes another 9 to 12 months to start getting any income from it.
What would you say is the general amount of time it takes from the artist releasing the song to it starting to chart? Or does it debut on a chart position?
It's like a release date. Let's say the release date is January 1st. It doesn't chart for another 3 to 4 weeks at number 49. And then you just praying you look at what's getting added at radio every week when you get that country air check email.
Yeah.
And
are you like, please don't let it be Luke Bryan? Like, please don't, or like certain artists?
You just
because it's strategic in a way too, right?
Well, it's out of our control.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. It's like, that's what I tell our writers. I said, please don't look at the charts. You're lucky enough to have the Parker McCullum single. Great. You can't do anything about how well it does. Write the next song is what you should be concerned about. It's going to go where it's going to go. So, but you have to have a string of those. So we've had a great 6 months in terms of that for the first time in 5 years. It's taken us that long to get that, but that's normal for a new company.
Yeah, that's interesting. I talked with Tony Harrell about MV2, and he said the exact same thing. It was about 5 years until they started to see that ROI.
Yeah, he's done a great job. He's such a talented guy too.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast, and he was really cool.
Great guy.
Yeah, and a great player, man. His
great
story,
player.
His story is really cool. This is all really interesting, and I think maybe for some people they're like, oh, this is a lot to digest. So to break it down on some like simple things that are going to be questions from your songwriter considering moving to town, what would you say to that person?
I would say you have chosen the most difficult line of work to make a living in on planet Earth, number one, where the odds are so stacked against you. So just know that, and know that if you can do something else, you should probably do it. And I could sit here and try to talk you out of it. And after all of the reasons I give you to not do it, you still say, I'm doing it. Well, then you need to be here. Okay? Because you have got to want to wake up every day and hear no. Like publishers, hearing no to a publisher, we hear no. We hear yes like 7 times a year.
Because you're pitching songs all the time.
You're pitching songs all the time, and you're trying to get people interested in your writer artists and all that stuff, and you just know most people are going to say no, and so it doesn't bum me out. I just know that when somebody says yes, or somebody calls and says, guess what, you've got Parker McCullum's single, I just go, wow, we just showed up and kept our head down, and that thing that was out of our control went our way this time. We can't do anything about it.
I think that's the key word is you just showed up and kept your blinders on.
You got to show up. It's like Harper O'Neill moved here from Dallas right before COVID, and just then COVID happened and she couldn't do anything and promote herself, and she fell in with this group of people that kind of all came up together, and their careers started happening right at the same time. And she didn't call me, and I didn't call her. She just appeared on my iPad one night, and I thought, I'll never meet this girl. And 2 days later, I'm meeting her. So all that stuff it's the intangibles that is in the atmosphere, and it could go your way. You've got to have that attitude when you come here, and also you have to have a real need to wake up and write every day. Like if you're a writer and you don't live here, and you just have to write a song that day, then you've got part of what it takes to try this. But you just got to know that once you get here, you're going to get around a bunch of people and you're going to go, shit, those people are so much better than me. I mean, and so you're going to have those feelings like I'm not good enough. And
that's what happened to me, just to interject.
Yeah.
But I think it was a good thing, because one's ability to judge themselves at a certain given point in time, it's like, oh yeah, my songs are really good. And then maybe 2 years later, 3 years later, you look back and you're like, oh, that song sucked, And then it's like you start to write with writers that are professional writers that have had hits, or that are really good writers, and then you're like, oh, like this is how they do it. And then you just start to learn that process slowly, and your songs get refined and refined and refined.
Yeah.
Which I think is a cool thing, but you have to be willing to acknowledge that, have a humility about you, where you can say, like, I could have you say to me, like, that song's not ringing the bell. Mm-hmm. And be okay with being told, like, it's not great. Back to the drawing board, another song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all, if I tell that to, I'm in the habit of responding anytime a writer writes a new song and they send it to us in an email. I respond to all of them, whether I like them or whether I think they missed the second line in the second verse. I always make some comment. Sometimes I don't make a comment, but I'll let them know that I'll listen to it. Because basically it's just like you don't want to demoralize anybody. You just want to go next, write the next one. That was not your best day, And it's like so much is the more with 4 or 5 people in the room writing a song these days. It's like so much is out of your writer's hands, So we love to sort of try to not get our writers in that situation, like 2 or 3 is really enough.
Yeah. Plus 5 is a lot of ownership.
Yeah.
With a lot of publishing.
No, nobody's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Even if you do hit a home run.
So age is a factor that I think people think about.
Okay.
Because some folks, not just in music, but in life, I'll meet people that feel like, oh, I'm too old to do this, or I'm too old to make a career change, or it's just something that is an insecurity in humans, I think. Now, I'll just throw myself under the bus. For someone like me, I'm 36, and I was really going at it hard until my mom got brain cancer. And then my mom got brain cancer. I was taking her to the doctor for almost a year. And during that time, my wife got pregnant, unplanned. And then it's like all of a sudden, you're caring for your mom. She passes. Then we have a baby 4 months later. And then it's like, oh, I got to make money for my family. And then part of me feels like when I took that hiatus, like I had to stop, and then it comes to now, and I'm like, I'm too old to continue at this. I don't know why I have that thought, but is that a valid thought, or should I not have that thought?
I think that's always been a thought that's been out there if you're a recording, especially if you're a recording artist. But Brooks and Dunn didn't have their first hit till they were 35. They both just kind of struggled along and had mediocre success in each one of their own artist careers until such time they were put together, and that's where the magic was. And I've always thought that younger singer-songwriters that are like teenagers. Taylor Swift is sort of breaks all the rules when I say this stuff, but when you're 25 and older, you've lived enough life and you've had your heart broken 1 or 2 times at least, and you have something to say. You kind of don't have a lot to say to a broader group of people when you're a teenager. Like I said, Taylor Swift is the exception to that rule.
I remember that, being a teenager and feeling like I didn't have a lot to write about.
Yeah. But you have the desire to write, but what do you write about that somebody's going to care about?
Exactly.
So when you're 25, you're an adult. I've always thought, when you're 25, you better have started adulting by then, and then you really sort of have this 5-year window to fully grow up. And by the time you're 30, it's on. Like you should be living life on your own, and your world life experience, you can, if you're a songwriter, you have something to say by that point.
Yeah, I moved here 6 months after I turned 30.
Yeah.
Because it felt like the right time.
Yeah.
And I think I would have gotten my butt kicked had I moved before that.
Yes.
And even when I moved here, like you said, you get in a room with people that are great songwriters and you realize, wow, I have a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. Like I have a lot to improve upon.
Yeah.
And then that refining process kind of starts. But you do have that life experience to draw from. Because I always felt like I have something to say, but how do I say it in the right way? And then that's where great songwriters come in, and that's where you learn.
Yeah.
The story has always kind of been the foundation, I guess, of country music. We come back to that. Mm-hmm. And you hear it in the Kim Burns documentary I mentioned before we started.
Yeah.
It's like about the story. Do you subscribe to that ideology of story first? or do you go more like song first in terms of lyric? Like it doesn't have to have a beginning, middle, and an end. Like it can be open-ended. Would you say that when people like to, again, put things in categories like country music, you got to tell a story, or can it be country music, you can say a simple truth about life?
Yeah, I think what I've always said that the best songs present a universal truth that everybody understands, but you're hearing it in a completely unique way. So that's really what it's all about. It can be a feeling that's not a story, but nobody's ever laid out that particular feeling in a song that way. It can be it can be a story that's unresolved. Those are some of the best. Just the pain just lingers at the end of the song because you don't know what that guy's going to do. I mean, it takes all kinds.
Do you encourage your writers to write up-tempo songs more than?
Mm-mm.
Okay, cool.
When A&R people call us and say we need the A&R person at Laney's label said after Hang Tight Honey told me, that type of song, it seems like that's what we're really wanting right now. And of course, A&R people say that they need up-tempo songs. They've always said that, and they will continue saying that. But then sort of, we watched what Laney's single did, and it did well. I mean, it did well. It was on like 6 or 7 major network TV shows. So the sync money we made from that alone is significant. But I think for radio, I think really up-tempo songs don't. It goes in seasons. Mm-hmm. I think we might be hitting a season where maybe they're not as effective as they thought they would be, and then a year from now it'll be different.
Yeah.
I don't tell my writers to write an up-tempo song. I think they should write whatever they want to write.
That's awesome, man. That's another thing that is really cool, and I think maybe unique to you, because I've had so many conversations with people that are like, you should only be writing up-tempo songs, But I'm attracted as a listener to sadder songs mm-hmm. and like mid-tempo songs.
Yeah.
What are your favorite songs to listen to in terms of up-tempo to slow?
Well, I kind of like all of them. And I know that's not a specific answer, but I just like music in general, and I love slow songs. I love slow songs. Sometimes when I hear a slow song, I want to hear more rhythm in it. I don't want to hear it faster, but I want to hear something that's moving, so it's not just feeling like a lot of dead air in between lines or whatever, and that's just production quality.
Yeah, it's a production thing. More transience in there. It's just
that's right.
Keeping you. Yeah. So music is obviously a business, and a lot of creatives don't think in terms of business. Mm-hmm. And a lot of creatives end up signing deals with not really understanding what they're signing exactly, or maybe they just don't get because it's a 60-page contract, whatever. Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is for creatives, young and old, to understand the business side of music? Because inevitably, if you're very successful, you have to understand it at some point.
Yeah, and the more creative the creator, the less interested they are.
Yes.
Or they're not interested, or that's just not their thing, and they hire somebody to do that for them. When they can afford it. I think to answer your question, it's very important that the writers or the artists understand the business from the very beginning, so that they don't feel hoodwinked into doing some deal that they didn't want to do. So,
what would be your biggest piece of advice in terms of, like, if you're an artist, you don't really know much about business, but you want to kind of have a basic understanding? Have you ever said, like, hey, maybe read this book, or like, hey, study this particular thing?
Yeah, I think, this business of music is sort of the Bible, and there's a new a new version of it probably every couple of years, probably with updated copyright law information and that type of thing. And it's a big, thick textbook, a lot of legalese in there, but it's got all the answers as concisely as possible and completely as possible. So there's that. And I think it's
and
just...
you can get it on Amazon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's Don Passman, a very talented attorney, wrote it. The original one 20 years ago or longer ago. And it's been updated through the years. So that's sort of the go-to, I think, in our industry.
Yeah. That's a good resource for anybody.
It's called This
listening.
Business of Music.
This Business of Music. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So I wonder if they have an Audible of it.
I don't know.
I would think by now that they might.
Probably.
I like to listen to books.
Yeah, me too.
What are you listening to lately, like podcasts or book-wise?
I'm listening to audiobooks more than I'm listening to podcasts. I'm right now listening to Michael McDonald's autobiography, which is fascinating because it's basically the history of LA-based pop music in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And he was in Steely Dan, he was in the Doobie Brothers. He's a super successful artist in his own right and came from, Missouri. I mean, it's just fascinating what he went through in his life.
Yeah, that's cool. I have to check that out.
Yeah.
I only like listening to nonfiction, like something if it's going to make me smarter.
Yeah. I also just listened to the biography of Lou Wasserman, who started MCA, and he's probably one of the three most influential Hollywood, film and TV moguls. And it was a biography about he and his wife and how they handled their career.
What are some of the commonalities that you've seen amongst successful people?
The thing that sort of my gut reaction to that is that they don't let a setback set them back. Like they don't stop moving because they have a setback. They sort of almost expect to have a setback, and here's that setback I was expecting. Okay, tomorrow's another day. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm not going to beat myself up. Keep moving.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people that I've seen that are very successful do that. And in Nashville especially, I think you have to take care of your business and the people that you're doing business with. Like for me, it's my writers and my employees. But you have to take care of your community too. So we're all pretty tight knit, and we all know each other in Nashville. We're all running into each other at the same watering holes, and there are no secrets. I mean, people think that they're secrets, but most people know what's going on in everybody else's business because that's always the way that Nashville has operated, And so because of that, you behave and you treat people nice. Because if we get sideways and I have a piece of business I want to do with you 6 weeks from now, we can't do it because we got sideways. So I'm going to make sure and mind my relationships. That's very important.
Yeah.
So successful people do that.
Yeah. I think not making any enemies
Yeah.
Is very important. Or at least having conflict resolution.
Yeah.
If there was a butting of heads, I think that's important.
Yeah, exactly.
What is your biggest, or not biggest, what are you most proud of in terms of a career accomplishment?
I think I'm proud of the tenure. I mean, I've almost done this for 50 years, which blows my mind because I still wake up every day and I left a corporate job at BMI. I worked there 3 different times in my career, and the last time was about 14 years. And my wife said, "Okay, I'm good with you doing that, but you can't, be in the house from 9 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night because that's my turf. And so you can go drive around or start another publishing company or do what you want to do." And she was kidding, but she's not kidding, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't want to stay home. I mean, I'm not a retirement type. I left BMI and immediately put this company together and started it 2 months later. And so I can't imagine not doing this at some level. And so I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that it's like here I'm in like the completing the 5th decade of doing this, and I still just want to hang out with songwriters. I mean, that's sort of the premise. Is like I like being around. I like being in the place where somebody who walks through the door that day who writes a song in my building could change the trajectory of their career or the trajectory of my company's career, my company's life,
and the lives of millions of people.
Yeah, exactly. We don't. I didn't even.
We don't even think about that. We're thinking about business.
We're just thinking about business,
yeah.
and I'm just now with this company being. I should probably start thinking more like that. I mean, and that's the altruistic. I think music is just really important in our lives.
Yeah.
It is.
It's and so the fabric of society, man.
Yeah. It's sort of like when you think about historically the great Nashville independent publishers, Combine Music, where Christopherson came out of, that's a great example of like that was a little bitty company started by a couple of knuckleheads who championed some of the best music that went all around the world when a lot of country music does not travel outside of North America. So that's, it's like music is very important. And I would like to think that, my legacy will be on that type of plane where we champion really great music, real copyrights, not knockoffs, not throwaways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that you have been part of so many already, and 50 years is a really amazing accomplishment that has to be acknowledged. And also, Country Music Hall of Fame this year, a couple things.
Yeah.
Will you talk about that?
Yeah, they were nice enough to include me in a thing called the Circle Guard, which it's just like I've been on their board for 15 or 16 years, and I've helped them raise money for their education department during that time, and chaired their development committee, and they honored me by putting me in the Circle Guard, which it's a group of about a dozen people who have a history of supporting the Hall of Fame, and that was a big honor. And it was great for me and my family. It was really nice.
Yeah, that is a beautiful.
I really
honor.
believe in what they do, and it's a great place and a great organization.
Yeah, it's by far my favorite place to go downtown.
Yeah,
because you walk through there and you look at the history and you see the actual instruments that people played, and there's just something magical to it.
Yeah, it is. It's great, and it's an accredited museum like the Smithsonian. The Hall of Fame was just honored by the president in Washington, along with some other individuals for got a Medal of Arts from the president, which was pretty impressive.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I read that you're the chair of the board.
I'm the chairman of the board this year. Yeah.
So can you explain what that is a little bit?
It's just boards in any organization, they are sort of the governing body. We don't run the place, but we meet periodically, and we have committees of the board that hear from the employees that head departments about how they're doing, how they're raising money, how they're saving money, how they're reaching out, what the outreach looks like to kids and education and all that type of thing. So we sort of we oversee and not run the organization.
That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
Because that's another huge accomplishment. That's just kind of a, I guess, representation of your legacy.
Yeah, it's when I was coming up, it was like, watching who has chaired the board before. It's like, that's, it's an honor.
Yeah.
It's an honor. Yeah.
It really is.
I've spent enough time at the place and knowing what they do that I'm comfortable in the role, you know, and it's a very well run organization.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Last question. Your biggest piece of advice for a musician, singer-songwriter that is in town, that is the 1% that said, I was told no, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to go for it. And I know we've talked about a lot of principles of like not giving up and being able to be told no, but specifically because your company and just like I think your mantra and the pillars you stand by are song first. What is that advice that you would give that young, hopeful dreamer that is right now at this very moment sitting in a room with their guitar writing a song?
Yeah, I think you've got to believe, you know, you've got to believe in yourself and you've got to believe in your own music. And you can't be arrogant about it. And you have to mind your relationships and you have to be present, you know. Don't give up. I mean, you said it in your question. It's really simple. I mean, it's like one of the tenets of life. If you want to go do something, don't give up. Unless there's some super compelling reason that you feel like you should stop. Why stop? I mean, it might take you 5 years longer to get there. But if that's what you really want to do and that's what motivates you and gets you out of bed in the morning, just don't stop. Keep doing it. And take care of your community and take care of your relationships around you.
Yeah.
Because on your worst day, your buddy over here is going to lift you up. And 2 weeks from now, you're going to be lifting him up because he's had an awful, he's been told no by everybody, or the publishing deal he was going to get didn't happen, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to, the coolest thing about moving here, if you decide to do it, is that you're going to find a whole hell of a lot of people that are just like you here, and it'll make you feel at home. So.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, Jody Williams, for being
thanks.
on the podcast.
Thank you, Stephan.
Yeah, we've covered a lot, and hopefully this can benefit people and educate them. And I appreciate you just opening up and sharing some of just the stuff about your own company. And to me, it was interesting because you peeled back the curtain on how things run, and I really enjoy hearing that stuff. So I want to acknowledge you for that and all your hard work and keeping at it and not retiring and impacting the world musically and impacting lives of your writers and your artists and giving people that don't have a voice a chance.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephan. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap on today's episode with Jody. Thank you, Jody Williams, for being here. And again, if you are a listener and you made it this far, please hit like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about it. We are working hard here to grow the podcast, and we appreciate your support and all your love. We'll see you next week for a new episode with a exciting songwriter. Peace.